Let me ask you something. What happens to the narcissist when the empath refuses to play? When the endless supply of forgiveness, attention, and energy suddenly dries up? Most people think the narcissist just moves on to their next victim. But here's the shocking truth: they don't simply walk away. They transform. And not in the way you'd expect, Carl Jung once said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The narcissist's life is built on unconscious patterns, masked identities, and borrowed energy. But when the empath, who has unknowingly been their most reliable source of fuel, finally refuses to play along, the narcissist is forced into a terrifying confrontation. For perhaps the first time, they're left alone with themselves. But here's the part nobody talks about: the narcissist, stripped of the empath's participation, doesn't simply collapse. They mutate. They shift into different masks, different roles, desperately scrambling to protect the fragile core they've spent their life hiding. And if you've ever stood your ground against a narcissist, you know exactly what I mean. Let's break it down. In the beginning, when the empath withdraws, the narcissist often reacts with rage. It's primitive, explosive, raw. Think of a child whose favorite toy has been taken away. They scream, stomp, demand it back. Except this isn't a child, it's a fully grown adult, consumed by entitlement. They lash out, accuse, threaten, and manipulate. Why? Because rage is their first defense against abandonment. But wait until you hear this: when rage fails, something even more insidious emerges: the victim mask. The narcissist suddenly becomes the wounded one. How could you abandon me? After everything I've been through? After all I've given you? They weaponize pity. They turn your empathy against you, hoping guilt will pull you back into their orbit. And if that doesn't work, they transform again. They become the charmer. Sweet words, sudden kindness, empty promises. I'll change, I swear. You're the only one who truly understands me. It's not love, it's strategy. They're shapeshifters, and each mask is designed to lure the empath back into the game. Here's the shocking truth: when the empath stops playing, the narcissist is forced into a kind of psychic panic. Because the empath is not just another partner, friend, or family member. They are often the mirror that reflects back the narcissist's false self. Without that mirror, the narcissist faces a void. And Jung warned us: the void of the unconscious, when unacknowledged, feels like annihilation. But here's the part nobody talks about: beneath the rage, beneath the manipulation, beneath the endless masks, there is something the narcissist fears more than anything else: their own emptiness. The empath refusing to play forces them closer to that truth. Let me give you a story to bring this alive. Imagine Sarah, an empath who spent years with a narcissistic partner. She forgave every lie, soothed every rage, and sacrificed her own needs for the relationship. But one day, Sarah woke up. She began setting boundaries. She stopped reacting to his outbursts. She no longer fed his ego with constant reassurance. At first, he exploded, yelling, blaming, threatening. Then came the tears. I can't live without you. You're abandoning me. When that failed, he shifted again: flowers, apologies, promises of change. But Sarah held firm. And as the weeks passed, she saw something she'd never seen before. He wasn't in control. He was unraveling. This next truth will shock you: the narcissist without supply often regresses to the wounded child they've spent a lifetime hiding. Beneath the masks is a terrified, undeveloped self that never learned how to survive without external validation. And that's why the narcissist doesn't just move on, they collapse. They may sink into depression, obsession, or self-destructive behavior. They may frantically seek new supply, but none of it feels enough. Because the empath wasn't just fuel, they were the one person who unconsciously symbolized safety. But here's the mystery: why does the empath hold such unique power over the narcissist? Jung might say it's because the empath carries the very qualities the narcissist disowns: authenticity, vulnerability, wholeness. In psychological terms, the empath embodies the self, the archetype of integration that the narcissist has repressed. So, when the empath refuses to play, the narcissist is confronted with their greatest fear: the possibility of seeing who they really are. But wait, there's another twist. Not every narcissist collapses the same way. Some escalate. They turn into destroyers seeking revenge. They smear, sabotage, and attack the empath's reputation. Others withdraw completely, becoming ghosts, vanishing into silence. Still, others morph into obsessive pursuers, cycling through rage, pity, and seduction endlessly. It's as if the narcissist, stripped of their main source of supply, is forced to shapeshift in real time, desperate to survive. And here's the part nobody talks about: they're not changing because they love the empath. They're changing because without the empath, their false self feels like it's crumbling. So let me ask you, what mask have you seen a narcissist wear once you stopped feeding the game? Did they rage, beg, charm, or vanish? Each mask tells you something about what lies underneath. Carl Jung believed that what we repress always returns, often in distorted ways. For the narcissist, what they repress is the unbearable truth of their own inadequacy. And when the empath walks away, that truth gets closer and closer to the surface. But here's the shocking question: what does the narcissist ultimately become if they can no longer control the empath? Do they evolve? Do they collapse? Do they find a new mask, or are they forced to face the shadow they've denied all their life? When an empath refuses to play along, the narcissist begins to unravel in ways that might shock you. For so long, the narcissist has been used to pulling the strings, casting the empath in the role of caretaker, healer, or silent sufferer. But when the script changes, the narcissist can no longer maintain the illusion of control. The mask begins to slip. And what emerges isn't just anger or disappointment, it is a deeper, darker transformation that reveals the truth of who they always were beneath the charm. But here's the part nobody talks about: the narcissist does not simply show one face. They cycle through multiple personas, each one an attempt to pull the empath back into the game. Let's walk through these transformations step by step, so you can see them for what they truly are. At first, the narcissist becomes the victim. This is their most immediate response. The moment the empath sets a boundary, the narcissist collapses into self-pity. Suddenly, the person who once projected power, dominance, and arrogance now appears fragile, misunderstood, and persecuted. They say things like, "I can't believe you'd do this after everything I've done for you," or "You're abandoning me just like everyone else." It's an emotional trap designed to awaken the empath's old programming. The instinct to fix, to soothe, to carry the pain of others. Carl Jung would have called this the projection of the wounded inner child, the part of the narcissist that never grew up, that still screams for validation and nurturance. But here's what's critical: it isn't a genuine cry for healing. It's a performance. It is the child within them manipulating the parent role in you. And if you're not careful, you step back into the same cycle: caretaker and taker, healer and wound. But once the empath refuses to feed this victimhood, the narcissist shape shifts. And this next truth will shock you: they become the martyr. Now, instead of crying out for help, they paint themselves as the noble sufferer. They want others to believe that you, the empath, are cruel, heartless, and ungrateful. They'll say to mutual friends or family, "I gave them everything, and this is how they repay me." Or they may post vague, dramatic statements online about betrayal and disloyalty. The goal: to trigger guilt and shame in you and to recruit flying monkeys who will pressure you back into compliance. Notice how this transformation is less about you directly and more about public image. Narcissists are deeply invested in how they appear to others. Jung wrote that every person wears a persona, a mask we show to the world. But for the narcissist, this mask is everything. Without it, they collapse. So when you stop playing along, their mask begins to fracture, and they desperately attempt to glue it back together with stories that cast them as innocent victims of your supposed cruelty. But wait until you hear this. If playing the victim and martyr doesn't work, the narcissist turns into something far more sinister: the persecutor. This is the face most people fear. Here, the narcissist lashes out with rage, threats, and manipulation. They may accuse you of being selfish, cold, or mentally unstable. They may sabotage your reputation, finances, or social connections. They want to punish you for daring to withdraw your energy, for refusing to keep the dance alive. This persecutor mode is their shadow breaking through the part of themselves they've denied and repressed. Jung called this the shadow archetype, the dark aspects of personality that we often hide, but which come roaring out when we feel exposed or powerless. For the narcissist, this shadow is filled with envy, rage, and deep shame. By attacking you, they attempt to project that shadow outward so they don't have to face it within themselves. Here's the chilling part. This persecution isn't just random anger. It's strategic. The narcissist studies your weaknesses and uses them against you. If they know you fear abandonment, they'll threaten to leave. If they know you value your reputation, they'll spread rumors. If they know you long for peace, they'll create endless chaos. It's psychological warfare, and it reveals the narcissist's desperation to regain the upper hand. But here's the part nobody talks about. When the narcissist realizes none of this works, neither victimhood, martyrdom, nor persecution, they sometimes transform into a ghost. Yes, a vanisher. Suddenly, they disappear from your life as if they never existed. No closure, no explanation. This is often called the discard phase, but Jung would describe it as the narcissist fleeing from their own confrontation with reality. You've become a mirror they can no longer control, and so they break it rather than see their reflection. Now, to the empath, this can feel devastating. After all, empaths thrive on connection and understanding. To be abandoned so abruptly feels like rejection at the soul level. But in truth, this disappearance is not about you, it's about their inability to face themselves. You refuse to play along, and without your energy, they crumble into emptiness. Their identity was never stable to begin with. It was always constructed around the supply you provided. But wait until you hear this next truth. The narcissist doesn't just become one of these personas, they cycle between them. One day, they beg you to stay, claiming no one has ever loved them like you. The next day, they rage, accusing you of betrayal. Then suddenly, they disappear, only to reappear later with apologies or love-bombing attempts. It's a psychological carousel meant to keep you dizzy, disoriented, and trapped. Carl Jung's insight into archetypes explains this perfectly. The narcissist, when threatened, doesn't integrate their shadow or grow through the confrontation. Instead, they switch masks. They become the eternal actor, shifting roles in a desperate attempt to maintain control of the narrative. The empath, however, is the first to see through the performance because empaths feel what isn't being said. They sense the hollowness beneath the words. They feel the manipulation woven into the emotion, and this is where the empath's true power emerges. By refusing to play along, the empath forces the narcissist into a kind of psychological exile. Without the empath's participation, the narcissist's masks lose their grip. They are left facing their own emptiness, their own shadow, their own unhealed wounds. Jung would argue that this is the moment of potential transformation, but most narcissists, sadly, run from it. Here's the hard truth. The empath's refusal exposes the narcissist's greatest fear, that they are not loved, not special, not in control. And rather than face that fear and grow, many narcissists double down on their illusions. But once the empath sees this clearly, the spell is broken. What happens when the empath not only refuses to play along, but begins to heal? This is the turning point most people never see coming. The narcissist expects resistance. They expect boundaries to wobble. They expect anger or tears, but they do not expect silence. They do not expect indifference. And they certainly do not expect an empath who has started to outgrow their old wounds. Because the truth is this: the empath's healing is the narcissist's undoing. But here's the part nobody talks about. When an empath heals, it isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It begins when the empath realizes that their worth is not tied to fixing others. That love does not mean self-sacrifice, and that peace does not mean tolerating chaos. Carl Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For so long, the empath's unconscious programming was to give, to heal, to endure. But when they finally bring that pattern into awareness, the cycle begins to collapse. To the narcissist, this healing feels like betrayal. They interpret it as coldness, arrogance, or even cruelty. Why? Because in their world, you were never meant to exist as an individual. You were meant to orbit around them, feeding their needs. Your healing breaks that gravitational pull. It leaves them spinning in their own emptiness, and they don't know who they are without you. Here's where it gets even darker. When the empath starts healing, the narcissist often transforms into the seducer again. They return to the beginning of the cycle, the love-bombing stage. Suddenly, they're charming, attentive, romantic, or supportive. They promise change. They swear they've realized their mistakes. They may even use therapy jargon to sound enlightened. They'll say things like, "I've never met anyone like you. I can't lose you," or "I finally see where I went wrong." But wait until you hear this. This is not real transformation. It's a recycling of the mask. Jung would say this is the persona in its most deceptive form. The carefully constructed image designed to lure you back into the dance. It's not growth, it's survival. The narcissist is trying to re-establish the old contract, the unspoken agreement that you give, and they take. For the empath who hasn't fully healed, this stage is the most dangerous. Because deep inside, there is still that longing for connection, that hope that maybe this time will be different. And the narcissist knows exactly how to play into that longing. It's not just manipulation, it's a mirror of the empath's deepest wound, the wound of being denied reciprocity, of being denied the right to be loved without conditions. But when the empath truly refuses to play along, when they stay grounded in their healing, the narcissist's frustration intensifies. This is when they often become the destroyer. And here's the shocking truth: the destroyer is not always loud and violent. It's often subtle, insidious, almost invisible. They may start small, planting seeds of doubt in your mind. Are you sure you're happy without me? I don't think anyone else will love you like I do. Or they may try to sabotage your healing by reintroducing chaos into your life. Sudden emergencies, financial entanglements, or emotional crises that pull you back into their orbit. Jung's concept of the shadow explains this perfectly. When someone refuses to integrate their shadow, those repressed, painful parts of themselves, it does not disappear. It spills outward. It attacks. For the narcissist, you become the target of that unintegrated shadow. They see in you everything they cannot face in themselves: independence, wholeness, light. And because they cannot integrate it, they try to destroy it. But here's the part nobody talks about. When the empath stands firm, something extraordinary happens. The narcissist begins to reveal their emptiness more openly. Without the empath's energy, without the constant reflection of their false self, they become exposed. And though they may rage or manipulate, there are moments, brief, fleeting moments, where you can almost see the truth. The mask slips and you glimpse the raw void underneath. This is the moment Jung would call the confrontation with the shadow. It is the invitation for the narcissist to face themselves. But here's the tragedy: most do not take it. Instead, they run. They find new sources of supply, new empaths, new audiences to play their roles with. They cycle back into their patterns because facing the inner void feels like death to them. But wait until you hear this. Because here lies the empath's greatest transformation. By refusing to play along, by healing, by standing firm, the empath has broken the cycle not just for themselves, but for generations. Yes, generations. Because many empaths became who they are due to childhood conditioning, growing up with parents who demanded caretaking, silence, or self-denial. By choosing differently now, the empath interrupts an ancestral pattern. They refuse to pass it forward. Think of it this way. The narcissist is like a storm, swirling with chaos, fear, and need. The empath used to stand in the middle of that storm, trying to calm it, trying to hold it together. But healing means stepping out of the storm, realizing that it was never theirs to hold. And when they do, the storm has no power over them anymore. And this next truth will shock you. The narcissist, without the empath's participation, is forced into a kind of identity crisis. They can no longer play the roles that once defined them. They must either seek new victims or face themselves. And though most choose the former, the seed of confrontation has been planted. Because deep down, Even the narcissist cannot escape the mirror of truth forever, but here's the secret the empath must remember. Their job was never to save the narcissist. Their job was to save themselves. Healing does not mean changing the narcissist. Healing means breaking the agreement that kept them trapped. And when that agreement dissolves, the empath discovers something they never thought possible: peace. Have you ever wondered why a narcissist seems more disturbed by your peace than by your anger? Why your silence bothers them more than your arguments ever did? The truth is simple, but unsettling. When the empath refuses to play along, the narcissist is forced to confront a reflection they cannot stand. And that reflection is of their own irrelevance, but here's the part nobody talks about. Narcissists thrive on disruption. They know how to handle chaos, they know how to provoke emotion, they even know how to twist anger into fuel. What they do not know how to handle is peace. Because peace cannot be manipulated, silence cannot be argued with, and detachment cannot be bent into submission. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists but will grow in size." For years, the empath resisted the narcissist's games, fought against the lies, defended themselves against manipulation. That resistance gave the narcissist energy, gave them presence, made them larger than life. But when the empath stops resisting, when they no longer engage, no longer explain, no longer justify, the narcissist begins to shrink. Their persona, once so powerful, starts to collapse in the absence of an audience. Here's the shocking truth. To a narcissist, the healed empath becomes a ghost they cannot touch. No matter how loud they shout, no matter how much they provoke, the empath does not respond in the old ways. That quiet detachment drives the narcissist into a deeper rage than any confrontation ever could. Why? Because it tells them they've lost control. And to a narcissist, loss of control feels like death. Think of it like a stage play. The narcissist has always been the main actor, and the empath was the loyal audience, clapping, crying, and reacting to every performance. But suddenly, the empath gets up, walks out of the theater, and doesn't come back. The show goes on, but the seats are empty. And here's what nobody tells you. A narcissist without an audience is nothing but an actor talking to an empty room. But wait until you hear this, because this next truth will shock you. When the empath detaches, the narcissist's perception of them shifts in two contradictory ways. On one hand, they idealize the empath more than ever, remembering the love, the loyalty, the energy they once received. On the other hand, they despise the empath with venom, because that very independence exposes the narcissist's inability to ever truly own them. This split perception both idolization and hatred creates the most unstable version of the narcissist you'll ever see. Jung's work on the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies, explains part of this. The empath, once enmeshed, was serving as a projection screen for the narcissist's inner world. The narcissist projected their hidden weaknesses, fears, and longings onto the empath. But when the empath steps back, that projection has nowhere to land. The narcissist is forced to feel the very emptiness they've been avoiding. And here's the part nobody talks about. This emptiness terrifies them more than losing the relationship itself. Because in truth, the empath was never just a partner, a friend, or a family member. They were a mirror, a mask, a lifeline. Without them, the narcissist is left staring into the abyss of their own fractured self. So, what does the narcissist turn into now? Many become the stalker of memory. They obsess. They replay the past. They watch from the shadows, trying to see if the empath will break their silence. They may follow on social media, ask mutual friends about you, or invent excuses to accidentally cross paths. This is not about love, it's about proving to themselves that they still matter, that they still have an anchor in your life. But here's the hidden danger. If the empath acknowledges even a breadcrumb, the cycle can start again. A single reply, a single emotional response, is enough for the narcissist to slip back into their performance. This is why the empath's greatest weapon is not confrontation, but consistency. Remaining grounded in peace, refusing to feed the performance, and choosing silence over engagement. And yet something fascinating happens at this stage. The narcissist begins to rewrite the story in their mind. They tell themselves the empath was ungrateful, selfish, or even cruel. They may smear the empath to others, painting them as cold or heartless. Why? Because rewriting the story is easier than facing the truth. Jung reminds us that the psyche will do anything to avoid true self-confrontation. The narcissist would rather distort reality than admit their own weakness. But wait until you hear this. The empath, by refusing to play, is doing something revolutionary. They are breaking the archetypal spell. They are no longer playing the role of the giver, the forgiver, the healer. They are stepping into their authentic self, the self that was denied during childhood. The self that no longer confuses love with sacrifice, and the narcissist sees this. They may not admit it, but they see it. They see the glow of freedom in your eyes, the calm in your voice, the strength in your silence, and this terrifies them. Because deep down, they realize the truth. You were never weak. You were never dependent. You simply chose to give, and now you choose not to. Here's a story to make it clear. Imagine a bird in a cage. The narcissist believes the bird is trapped because it cannot fly. They believe the cage is what keeps the bird safe, obedient, present. But one day, the bird refuses to sing. The silence grows louder. And finally, the cage door opens not because the narcissist freed it, but because the bird realized it was never truly locked in. The bird flies, and the narcissist is left staring at an empty cage. That is the healed empath. When the empath refuses to play along, something extraordinary happens. The narcissist begins to unravel. But here's the shocking truth. Their unraveling doesn't look like collapse at first. It looks like escalation. It looks like desperation disguised as intensity. And if you've ever stood at this crossroads with a narcissist, you know exactly what I mean. The moment they sense you slipping beyond their control, they transform into someone else. This is the stage where the narcissist becomes the desperate manipulator. They no longer rely on subtle tactics. Instead, they amplify everything. The texts become more frequent, the promises more dramatic, the threats more insidious. Suddenly, they're oscillating between "I can't live without you" and "you'll regret losing me." And it's not just emotional manipulation, it's survival mode, but wait until you hear this. To the narcissist, losing control over the empath feels like ego death, and ego death is the one thing they cannot tolerate. Carl Jung often spoke of the danger of identifying too much with the persona, the mask we show the world. For the narcissist, that mask isn't just a role, it's their entire identity. When the empath refuses to reflect it back, it begins to crack. And what lies beneath is terrifying to them: emptiness, shame, and the shadow they've avoided all their lives. This is why they escalate. Imagine a drowning person thrashing wildly, pulling anyone nearby underwater just to keep themselves afloat. That's what the narcissist does when the empath no longer feeds them. They'll use whatever works: guilt, pity, rage, or even fake vulnerability. One moment they'll say, "I've changed. I promise you'll see." The next, they'll hiss, "You'll never find someone who loves you like I do." Here's the part nobody talks about. The narcissist doesn't just escalate with you, they escalate with themselves. They may spiral into reckless behavior, overspending, substance abuse, impulsive decisions, or jumping into new relationships at lightning speed. This isn't genuine joy or freedom. It's a frantic attempt to fill the vacuum your absence has created. It's the shadow trying to numb itself instead of facing the truth. Jung would say that the narcissist at this point is on the edge of individuation, the process of becoming whole. But instead of moving inward, they double down on projection. They project their fear of abandonment onto you. They accuse you of betrayal, selfishness, or cruelty. They project their shame by trying to shame you. And they project their emptiness by seeking constant stimulation. Anything to distract from the silence you left behind. But wait until you hear this, because this next truth will shock you. Sometimes, in this stage, the narcissist tries to become you. Yes, you heard that right. They mimic the very qualities they once mocked. If you've become spiritual, suddenly they talk about meditation and healing. If you've grown confident, suddenly they imitate confidence. If you've learned self-respect, they echo those same words back to you. But here's the catch. It's not authentic. It's a strategy. They are mirroring your transformation, hoping to lure you back in. This is why the empath must stay grounded. Because the narcissist's mimicry can look convincing, even seductive. But as Jung would remind us, symbols without substance are empty. The narcissist can imitate the words, the gestures, even the rituals, but they cannot embody the transformation without facing their shadow. And facing their shadow is the one thing they resist at all costs. So what happens when mimicry fails? The narcissist often turns to smear campaigns. They shift from trying to win you back to trying to destroy your image. They may tell mutual friends that you've changed for the worse, that you're cold, ungrateful, or manipulative. They project their own traits onto you, rewriting the narrative to protect their ego. This is not just about revenge, it's about control. If they can no longer control how you see them, they'll try to control how others see you. But here's the part nobody talks about. The smear campaign is also a confession. Every insult they throw, every false story they spread, it's really about them. When they call you selfish, it's their own selfishness. When they accuse you of lying, it's their own deception. Jung's theory of projection reveals this perfectly. We see in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. The narcissist's accusations are a map of their own shadow, and yet, here's where the empath's refusal to play becomes even more powerful. Because when you don't defend yourself, when you don't retaliate, when you simply continue living in peace, something happens. The smear campaign loses its power. People begin to notice the gap between the narcissist's story and your calm presence. And slowly, the truth begins to reveal itself without you having to say a word. Think of it like this. The narcissist is frantically painting a picture of you in dark, ugly colors. But when you walk into the room, glowing with peace and authenticity, the contrast is undeniable. No amount of paint can hide the light of someone who has healed. But wait until you hear this, because this is the part almost nobody understands. The narcissist's escalation isn't just about you. It's about time. They know deep down that their tactics have an expiration date. The longer you stay detached, the weaker their hold becomes. And once the cycle breaks, once you've seen behind the mask, they know they can never fully control you again. That realization terrifies them more than anything else. This is when some narcissists retreat entirely. They disappear, moving on to new sources of supply, leaving behind the wreckage of their failed attempts. Others linger in the shadows, testing boundaries, waiting for a crack in your armor. Either way, the empath's consistency is the key. Because the narcissist's transformation into the desperate manipulator is only temporary. Without fuel, even desperation burns out. And here's the most important truth. The empath does not have to fear this stage. Because escalation is not power, it's weakness. It's the final grasp of someone who senses the game is over. The storm may rage, but storms always pass. And when it does, the empath is left with something the narcissist may never know: freedom. What happens when a narcissist realizes the empath has stepped out of their game? When the silent compliance, the subtle giving, the endless emotional fuel is gone, they don't just accept it. They transform. They shift. They mutate into different versions of themselves, each one more desperate than the last. And this is where the empath finally sees their true nature, not the mask, not the performance, but the raw, unfiltered survival instinct beneath. But here's the part nobody talks about. These shifts are not random. They follow a deeply predictable psychological script. If you can see the pattern, you can prepare yourself. If you don't, you'll be pulled back in, right where they want you. Let's begin with the first transformation. 1. The sudden charm. Offensive at first, the narcissist may respond to your refusal by becoming sweeter than ever. They turn on the charm you once fell for. They make promises they never made before. Suddenly, they remember your favorite songs, your dreams, the way you like your coffee. They might even say, "I realize now I took you for granted. I'll change. Just give me one more chance." To the empath, this can feel disorienting. After all, isn't this what you always wanted? For them to finally see you? For them to care enough to adjust? But here's the dangerous truth. This isn't love. It's survival. They're not rediscovering who you are. They're trying to reestablish control, Carl Jung once said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This charm offensive is the unconscious survival mechanism of the narcissist. They don't choose it consciously. It's ingrained, automatic. If you fall for it, you're pulled back into the fate of repeating the same cycle again and again. Wait until you hear this. If charm doesn't work, the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. 2. The explosion of rage. The second transformation is rage. When their charm fails, they panic. Rage is their weapon of shock and fear. Suddenly, the person who just begged for another chance turns into someone who screams, belittles, insults, or throws accusations like daggers. Why? Because rage serves one purpose: intimidation. It's an attempt to scare you back into compliance. The empath may feel stunned. You might think, where did this come from? I didn't do anything to deserve this. And that's exactly the point. Narcissistic rage rarely has proportional cause. It's not about what you did. It's about their terror of losing control. Imagine a cornered animal. It bares its teeth not because it hates you, but because it feels its survival is at stake. That's what the narcissist's rage is, survival disguised as aggression. But here's what nobody tells you. Beneath that rage is not strength. It's weakness. It's the cracking of the fragile ego they've been protecting all along. 3. The desperate victim. When rage fails, they shift again. And this time, they become the victim. They'll cry. They'll collapse. They'll suddenly be the most misunderstood, unloved, broken soul you've ever seen. You might hear things like, "After everything I've done for you, how could you leave me? I guess I'm just a terrible person. No one ever really loves me. You're abandoning me, just like everyone else." To the empath, this is perhaps the most dangerous transformation of all, because your heart is wired for compassion. You don't want to see anyone suffer, especially not someone you once cared for. And here's the trap. If you give in to pity, you're right back in their control. This victim role is powerful because it flips the narrative. Suddenly, you're not the wounded one, they are. Suddenly you feel guilty for leaving. This is not by accident. It's a calculated survival response, often unconscious, designed to pull at your empathy like strings on a puppet. But here's the hidden truth. If you look closely, you'll notice something. Their tears are not about love. They're about losing supply. It's not you they mourn. It's the control they're losing over you. 4. The resigned martyr. When charm, rage, and victimhood all fail, the narcissist sometimes moves into a strange, almost spiritual role, the martyr. They say things like, "Fine, I'll let you go. I hope you're happy without me. I guess I wasn't good enough for you after all. Someday you'll realize what you lost, but by then it will be too late." On the surface, this seems like acceptance. But listen carefully. It's not true release. It's an attempt to plant doubt in your mind to make you second-guess yourself later. It's a seed of guilt and fear disguised as grace. This martyrdom isn't peace. It's the last card they play, hoping you'll circle back on your own. Hoping that days, weeks, or months later, you'll feel a wave of guilt and think, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should go back. But here's the shocking truth. The martyr role is just another mask. It's not surrender. It's a manipulation of memory, the empath's crucial choice. So, what does the empath do in the face of all these transformations? The answer is both simple and incredibly hard. You hold the line, because here's the paradox. The narcissist's transformations are not signs of love, but signs of desperation. They prove that your refusal has disrupted the script. You've broken the unconscious pattern. You've stepped out of their shadow. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When the empath refuses to play, the narcissist is forced into a transformation. But so is the empath. The question is, will you transform into someone who reclaims their power, or will you be reshaped back into the role you outgrew? Wait until you hear this. The next phase is where things get even darker. Because sometimes the narcissist doesn't stop at manipulation. They escalate into obsession. They begin to stalk, to sabotage, to weave themselves back into your life in ways that feel inescapable. And that's where we'll go next.